Hey there. So someone sent me a screenshot of T. Renshaw's post, and and had questions. Because of the number of people that T. Renshaw reaches, she's got like 6,000 subs or something. I have to address it from time to time. She's coming back about the new covenant, calling us false teachers, because now she's saying that the Gentiles actually partake of the new covenant and she used a verse from Isaiah to show that the Gentiles' offerings will be accepted in the temple, which will be a house of prayer to all nations. And this isn't really what we have been talking about. We've been talking about the church and our relationship to the new covenant. But again, the new covenant is for Israel. It's for the house of Israel and for Judah to maintain a holy priesthood and maintain a holy position before God in their land for 1,000 years with their king, Christ, ruling. And he will rule the nations with a rod of iron. Now, it is true that the Gentiles' offerings will be accepted, but the position of the Gentiles is totally different than that of the Jews. Israel will be exalted among the nations, above the nations, and the Gentiles will come to Zion to learn, because the law shall go forth from Zion. You can see that in Isaiah 2 and Romans 11, I believe. And they will actually be required to maintain a memorial offering and attend a feast, a memorial feast. I guess it's yearly. And if they don't, I believe it's Isaiah that says that if the nation of Egypt doesn't come up for the feast, he won't send rain. They will not receive rain. Now, these memorial feasts will be because the Gentiles will be born and die and grow old and live during the time of the Lord's rule, and will need to be taught that he had put us, and that they need to be redeemed. The situation is going to be so benevolent that they might not see the need. And in fact, we know that jealousy will stir up among the nations. At the end of the millennium, the nations are going to come again to march against the holy city, Jerusalem, and the saints. And God is going to wipe them out. There will be a final rebellion. Now, what's that rebellion stirred up by? Well, it's because the Gentiles are under the rule of a resurrected king, and the Jews have a class. They are in a better class and position before them. They're honored above them. I'm sure that'll produce some jealousy, and Satan will take advantage of that when he's led out at the end of the millennium, and it says he'll go forth and deceive the nations again, and they will come and march against the holy city. But again, that shows that the Gentiles are one thing, and the holy city, Jerusalem, and the saints are another thing. Now, the Gentiles they don't have a part in the land. The land, see, the new covenant is also a land covenant. It is a replacement for the Mosaic covenant. It allows them to stay in their land as God's holy people. Under the old covenant, which they broke, they weren't able to stay in the land. Okay? But because God is enabling them supernaturally to keep this covenant, they will be able to maintain the priesthood. He will cause them to walk in its statutes and ordinances, and he will cause them to walk in their ways, his ways, and they will keep it. And think about it. These people are living for 1,000 years. God's going to preserve them in holiness. This is totally supernatural. And they will also enjoy their portion in their land, which is allotted to them by tribe. So the tribes of Israel have a literal distinction as being able to dwell in the land as their inheritance, from the river Euphrates all the way. It's the whole thing, not just what we see in little Israel today. Again, though, the new covenant provides that the children of Israel won't need to be taught. They'll all know the Lord from the least to the greatest, and none shall teach their brother. There's not a teaching ministry under the new covenant, which again is different than the New Testament ministry for the church, because God gave us teachers, prophets, evangelists, shepherds. There will be no prophets in the new covenant time. In fact, if anybody says they're a prophet, they'll be put to death, because they won't need it, because all shall know me from the least to the greatest. Speaking of those who have the Spirit because of the new covenant, the Spirit of sonship, they will have a special relationship to God that is not like the Gentiles. The Gentiles, in contrast, will have to come up to Zion to learn from Zion. The law will go forth from Zion, and they will learn from them. So T. Renshaw said that, see, this proves that the Gentiles are partakers of the new covenant because their offerings are accepted in that temple as a house of prayer for all nations. No, that actually proves the opposite, that they need to come up and maintain those offerings. They need to keep the feast. And there's a mandate that goes from Jesus that if they don't, he will not send rain on them. There's a disciplinary rod of iron going on during the millennium. That will not be the case in the new heavens and the new earth when sin and death are finally put away with. But during the millennium, there's still mortals being born and having lives and living and dying. And the Gentiles will still have the law of sin in their members. They'll still need to be regenerated, or whatever their salvation looks like. They'll still need to be justified by faith. Those that are born, apparently some of them won't, because at the end there's a rebellion, right? So it's not all perfect. It's much better than it is today, but it's still a process. God is heading up all things in heaven and earth in Christ, and it won't be complete until Christ delivers the kingdom over to the Father, and that God is all in all at the end of the millennium. And then there's the great white throne judgment, and the new city Jerusalem, and the new heavens and the new earth, and then there's no more death. But as long as there's death and sin and mortality and weakness and corruption, which there still will be in the millennium, there's need for special arrangements. For Israel, they need a special arrangement to exist in the land and enjoy their portion, and that's called the New Covenant. And they will have a beautiful relationship with God. And then the Gentiles will learn from them. They will come to Zion to learn. So again, that shows that the New Covenant is not for Gentiles, because under the New Covenant, none shall teach his brother, saying, know the Lord. All shall know me, from the least to the greatest. So again, what's happening is people are trying to allegorize the New Covenant, take away its literal power, which is reserved for the people of Israel, and results in a holiness that we've not seen yet. The first fruits of that New Covenant are the 12,000 from each of the 144,000, 12,000 from each of the tribes who are sealed during the tribulation, who will have the name of the Father on their foreheads, and they will be in perfect holiness, not a spot. They will follow the Lamb wherever he goes, and they will have no lie found in their lips, okay? And they will be virgins and undefiled. And that will be, that's speaking of the holiness, the beauty of holiness that is going to typify the entire nation of Israel. And there are tons of promises in the scriptures. I'm on my way to a wedding, so I can't pull them up right now. But I've asked a couple people, and I'll do a video showing the glorious state of Israel during the millennium. The heirs, And in order to put the church under the new covenant, or say it's for the Gentiles, you have to subtract from what the new covenant actually says it's going to provide. And they allegorize it. Okay, that it just in order to apply it to any other group, you can't take it literally. It's literally for the house of Judah and for Israel. It's literally to cause them to walk in his statutes and ordinances, to be holy and to not to depart from his ways, and to have a new heart and a new spirit. He'll take away the heart of flesh. He'll put a new spirit in them and put his spirit in them and cause them to keep his ways. And they shall all know him, from the least to the greatest, and won't even need teachers. It's even, in some senses, more glorious than what we have today in expression, except in that time we will be glorified kings and priests. We're not Gentiles. We're coming back with the Lord to reign. We share in his portion, which is the Davidic covenant, which gives him the rod of iron to rule and to inherit the nations. And we're co-heirs together with him. Our status is even higher than Israel, but Israel will have an exalted place. And that's the thing. Everybody knows that the new covenant is not for the Gentiles, although they will enjoy the blessing of the kingdom because of Israel maintaining their position and Christ ruling. But they still will need to be justified by faith. They'll still sometimes rebel. They'll still need the discipline and the rod of iron. They'll still apparently sometimes not even come to the feast. And at the end, many of them will rise up in rebellion against Christ and against his saints and against the holy city. So I just wanted to point that out. And I'm not going to go back and forth with T. Renshaw. It's just, she has 6,000 or 7,000 subs, so sometimes you have to address these things because people come to be confused. Well, what about this and what about that? So that's the answer to that. And all these things are basic eschatological study. All you have to do is get a Wolverd basic major Bible themes and study the nations and Israel and prophecy. He's got it laid out in real easy to read, bite-sized chunk chapters with tons and tons of verses so you can look at it yourself. And again, I guess I need to collect the verses regarding the distinction between Israel and the Gentiles during the Millennium, and what is their different roles going to be, and what is Israel going to look like. And then, but the problem is that I'm not going to win an argument with T. Renshaw about this because, number one, she's not going to listen. She's not going to listen to anything I say. And number two, her whole point is to prove us wrong and to prove that we're false teachers. It's not that she's making a positive point and really bringing, some blessed revelation that if you could just see this. No, it's just we're false teachers and here's why. And she throws up scriptures taken out of context to make assertions that just show that she needs to go and do her homework about the role, and from a dispensational perspective. And she may decide that she's not a dispensationalist. She may just, that's fine. But then we're really not having a conversation. But no, I'm not going to keep going back and forth with her because it's not a conversation. And I don't watch her videos or anything like that. I try to stay clear of it, but I do receive emails from time to time, and sometimes I think I need to address a point or two. All right, take care.